Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining the First African Methodist Episcopal Church Drama Guild inaugural presentation of our virtual Readers Theater. Tonight's performance is adapted from a new novel, My Love Story in Broken English, written by Anilam Tebesha. An Ethiopian child bride is empowered by love, courage, and hope as her young groom stands up for his wife against an enduring culture, rife with practices that create and sustain inequality between women and men. Adapted by Carmen Hayward Stetson and Eddie Wheeler. Produced by Artistic Director Carmen Hayward Stetson. Directed by Eddie Wheeler. Our cast tonight follows the tradition of multiculturalism and blind casting from the African diaspora. Our heritage and our dialects are from our individual ancestries: Eritrea, Ethiopia, Liberia, Nigeria, Belize, and the United States of America. Let us read you a story. Ladies and gentlemen, My Love Story in Broken English.
I am Almas Tefera. This is my love story.
This love I carried deep inside my heart as I paddled the tumultuous river of life, traveling through continents, crossing deserts, and surviving death. Its roots go back to the old wrinkled land, which was mentioned some 40 times in both the Old and New Testaments, and where the Prophet Muhammad told his followers to go and seek refuge from persecution. Ethiopia, that ancient kingdom of the Queen of Sheba, the phoenix that keeps rising from the ashes, is where my story begins. I'm now in a faraway land that stretches from ocean to ocean to ocean, whose indigenous owners kept its doors wide open and filled it with people like me. We affectionately call it Canada.
To Canada. Lord, heed not my complaint of winters that bite, of hard work little respite, of high taxes and no returns, of society with prejudice and a nation with growing pains. Lord, heed not my complaint truly, for I am grateful sincerely for giving me this country to cherish and value, proud to call my own. Alas, how does one show a love so deep? Meager are my means, I have no gift, I cannot write nor can I sing. Flawed is my English, my French so little. To Canada this book I dedicate, to say un grand merci, for I am no more refugee.
As a student of English as a second language, I was taught by a gifted educator we called Teacher Irene. After 2 years of hard work, Teacher Irene gave her class an assignment to write our stories, even if it is in broken English, she told us. My classmates wrote about immigration, separation, war, and persecution. Mine was a love story, so I called it My Love Story in Broken English. It all started one morning when I woke up with a headache, one of those silly headaches that I always refused to acknowledge and treated with indifference, even contempt. In my village, no one died from headaches, so we had no regard for illnesses that come and go. We called them the morning dew, meaning here now, gone by noon. We, the God-fearing villagers of Sequala, dreaded only those plagues that come once, and when they leave, an entire village is wiped out. But this silly headache of mine turned out to be different. To my surprise, it moved down to my eyes, turned around my ears, and threatened to invade my entire body. It felt like a loud thunder, announcing the arrival of the rains after a 2-year drought. So I named it Madam Thunder. In my village, headaches are always female, and death is male. Madam Thunder was ignored for a few days when we finally decided to seek elder advice. In my village, no patient was treated before consulting the elders. But Sequala elders did not believe in some white-robed doctor who put stuff in your mouth and claimed to see the invisible. Worse, they knifed you with a needle to shed your precious blood, which was then collected into a bottle and taken to an unknown location for some voyeur to see the disease. We stayed away from people who poked us, bled us, and pretended to hear our inside voices. In truth, Sequala, no one was ever seen by the medicine man. Those who were taken to his shop were so sick that they all died. We heard that in a shop full of gadgets, the doctors could never bring back to life a single dead person, so we never bothered going there. In my case, the decision was to treat me with the holy water from Saint Teklehamenot Church. This one-legged Ethiopian saint was touched by God himself. As a monk, it was said that he stood on one foot praying for such a very long time that the standing foot literally fell off from sheer exhaustion. When the foot came off, a wing was sent by God. It appeared where the foot had been. Peter Cowther wrote this poem for Saint Teklehamenot. A more surprising saint there's not than Abuna Teklehamenot. There is none other quite so quaint. He is my all-time favorite saint. He spent his time converting kings, and once he sprouted several wings. Well, I'm ashamed to say this, but Madam Thunder had proven difficult for Saint Teklehamenot. Originally planned for 3 days, the period for holy bath was extended to 7, 14, and finally 21 days with little results. It was then concluded that my faith was not strong enough to fight off this silly headache. In fact, no one had accepted the fact that a simple headache was winning over this saint of miracles. One group of peasants insisted that the saint was going to act in time. Was that my headache had prevailed over the saint and I was dying a slow death.
What is a headache?
When he can actually bring back people from the brink of death.
The second group argued that there were times when Saint Teklehamenot was so slow that some people did die. This, however, was said in an almost inaudible voice, so I could not swear that I heard every word. To be honest, I never heard anyone say this with authority. The truth, however, was that my headache had prevailed over the saint, and I was dying a slow death. In the end, it was concluded that what I had was not a silly headache, but a killer monster. With much regret, the elders finally conceded that some other intervention was needed to save a young bride from an imminent death. Every time I heard the words young bride, I felt love. A love so powerful that it woke me up from death several times. I will tell you about my love. But first, about me.
In Sequala, it was improper to speak highly of oneself. Yet, village commentators said, if God was the architect, I was simply the best piece of art he ever designed. In Sequala, beauty was always defined as almas tefera, black as the midnight sky without stars, long as the blue Nile, and wavy like the Sahara Desert. My hair covered my entire back like a velvety shawl. My face, ebony carvings of precision, harmony, and tranquility, was put together by God himself, taking care that I would be an enduring center of attraction. Huge, almond-shaped, and draped by thick, long lashes, my eyes shone with a permanent ray of light. Flat with 2 cute openings, my nose was the epicenter people used to describe my beauty. Brownish in color and swollen as if stung by angry bees, my lips looked like they had a permanent smear of honey, probably a remnant of that sting. Let me now come to God's true piece of art, my teeth. No color white could adequately describe the whiteness of my teeth. If God had spent a full day making me, my teeth must have taken half of that time. Every time I checked my face, In a broken piece of mirror, I took time to compare my teeth against each other. Only God could line up 30-some pieces with such perfection. In my village, the comment was that not a single tooth stood out is a sign of total obedience to God. My height was a perfect sum of my neck, torso, behind, thighs, and legs. No portion of my body stood out as to create a miscalculation. Like the camels of the Danakil Desert, I moved with an arresting grace, slowly, deliberately orchestrating my movements, demanding full attention. My physical beauty was complemented by my intellect, which village commentators compared to that of the Queen of Sheba, who traveled to Jerusalem to learn from King Solomon's wisdom. But this comparison was never appreciated by my father, who always complained.
The queen brought back an illegitimate son, not wisdom.
This I found unfair, because, in all likelihood, the Queen of Sheba was raped by King Solomon, who tricked her into entering an impossible accord, which he used to sleep with the Virgin Queen. This is how it happened. Upon arrival, the Queen of Sheba was hosted to a lavish feast, attended by high priests and invited guests. Sensing his lascivious desire, the queen had warned the king on this night that he was not to touch her. So long as she agreed not to take anything of his while his guest, the king accepted her request to respect her.
But he tricked her by feeding her an extremely spicy meal, which made her thirsty in the middle of the night. Looking for water, she found the glass the king deliberately left by her side. When she reached it, he surfaced out of nowhere and declared that she had broken the agreement. She had to pay the price.
The queen swallowed her Ethiopian pride, slept with the king, and returned with a royal fetus that became Prince Menelik. This illegitimate son of the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon, believed to have brought back the Ark of the Covenant into Ethiopia, is perhaps responsible for the enduring bond between Ethiopians and the Israelites.
I confess, according to village historians, Sequalans were rumored to be the fruit of this unholy affair.
Having learned about King Solomon, Menelik wanted to meet his father, that he traveled the same journey with his mother when he was conceived. When they met, the king knew that this indeed was his son, not only because of the likeness, but also because Menelik was wearing the ring that King Solomon gave to the Queen of Sheba.
Following their intimacy, the king was said to have presented this ring to the queen, saying, "Should you conceive from this union, this is the ring our child shall wear when he comes to meet me." This ring was kept with great care until the son came of age and was presented as evidence that he was the king of Solomon. At the end of the son's visit, King Solomon suggested that Menelik settle down in Israel and assume his royal duties. Menelik instead chose to go back to his mother. On his departure, Solomon presented his son with a group of young Israeli men to accompany him and settle down as his subjects in the kingdom of Queen of Sheba. These Israeli men met Ethiopian women and settled down in the then Zagwe dynasty, where Sequala was located.
All this to say that my roots do go to the Queen of Sheba, but mine was not a happy arrival because my mother died during delivery. This tragedy half killed my father, so the valued friend had to step in as a second father to the five of us. Motherless, with no sister, I was raised by men. What I lacked as a motherless child, I gained as a child of a doting father, a sister of protective brothers, and a daughter-in-law of a man who came into my life without my choice. The first 10 years of my life were half nomadic, as I was taken from home to home for training in womanhood, cooking, baking, brewing, knitting, basket weaving, cotton spinning, hair plaiting. Coming from a long line of traditional healers, I was also taught how to identify and use plants for different ailments. At home, a priest came regularly to teach me the Ethiopian alphabets, so I could read the Bible. During my visits to grandmothers and aunts, I was told about the secrets women used to please, fight, defeat, or humiliate men. I took my lessons to heart and excelled in almost everything. I cooked the most delicious wot, stew in the Amharic language. I wove the mind-boggling baskets. I knitted cotton shawls that surpassed the beauty of silk, and brewed the most ink. I also never forgot what women told me.
Men are the enemies women raise.
Barely 10, I was given the responsibility of looking after the family, in charge of keeping 5 men fed, cleaned, and respected. Day after day, I cooked, baked, brewed, keeping my brothers happy and my father proud. This I did at a cost. I was always the first to get up and the last to go to
You
bed.
never saw a mouse sleep, and yet, look at her, a work of art.
It never occurred to me that this was unfair. In fact, it felt good to hear them praise St. Tekla Haimanot for giving the family a daughter. After 4 years of hard labor, I turned 14. This was the age when girls were prepared for marriage. Any other family would suffer a secret shame that there was a 14-year-old virgin in the house waiting for a proposal.
If by 15, a girl was not chosen for a prospective husband, her least choice would be some 30-year-old widower or grumpy old father of 5 in search of a carnal pleasure. This would remain a black mark on the family as one with a 15-year-old spinster.
Where I come from, there was no greater shame. My family had no such problem. I was given as a daughter-in-law to a valued friend who accepted me as a token of friendship. I was never told that I was engaged to be married to one of the valued friend's sons. Growing up, we all heard about this boy who was taken to the city, and when we asked what happened to him, we were told that he was being schooled. Indeed, he proved to be a scholar. By age 10, he had completed 8 years of elementary school. At 14, he graduated from secondary school, and 4 years later, he received a degree with distinction. On his graduation, he received an award of substantial funding for an education project in our village. 2 years later, age 20, he arrived back in Sequala, armed with a certificate, a high school diploma, and a degree in pedagogy. Upon his arrival in our village, he was overheard declaring his intentions.
I am here to open a school, teach every boy and girl, and bring civilization to Sequala.
In no time, news about a plan for schooling spread throughout the village, igniting the first rural revolution in Sequala. The next day, the entire village came out to protest against the boy. Led by the priest, their hands stretched to the sky, elders beseeched God to spare them from what they called the urban curse, conniving to attract boys and girls to the city. Every single village had a complaint. Father said that the boys were to be taken away from the much valued work of sheep herding. Mothers complained that without daughters, they were not able to take care of the children, look after the elders, and feed the men and the boys. Children joined their parents, grumbling that they were to be taken to the city, where people did not grow their own food.
This was the homecoming our young man received from Sequala. When the gathering arrived in front of his parents' house, the city boy was asked to step out and tell them what he was up to. In response, he delivered a speech that changed Sequala's fate.
Honored elders, respected parents, beloved brothers and sisters. My name is Lemma, born and raised here till age 5, when I was taken by uncle to get urban schooling in Addis Ababa. I am now 20 years old. For 15 years, I dreamt of Sequala, of our churches, the ravens, the mountains and the fields. In my dreams, I saw faces and heard your voices. I heard the laughter of the shepherds as they came back home with their cattle and saw the women with pots on their backs going to the river. Every time I woke up from these dreams, I wept. The longer I was separated from Sequala, the stronger became my sense of belonging. So I decided to hurry up, finish my schooling, and rush back to Sequala. And here I am. I was taken away because we did not have a single school here. We still are without one. If we do not open a school, more children will be taken away for city life and urban schooling. Some will follow my example and come back. Others will never see Sequala again. So, if you want your children to stay around, we must open a school here. Every time you sell your produce to city merchants, you depend entirely on the traders who always take advantage of your ignorance. When we complain, we constantly told to the calculations ourselves, knowing well that we cannot. This school will put an end to this exploitation because I will teach your children how to add, subtract, divide, and multiply. In Sequala, childbirth has become a death sentence for young women because they have only half a chance to survive. If I open this school, midwives will be trained in better methods. They will no longer be funerals for new mothers, and the fear of growing up motherless will be history. Yes, farming is our life, and our life is about farming. Sequala farmers are renowned for their ability to read the clouds. By looking up to the skies, a farmer can tell whether the rains will come early, late, or on time. He can predict the amount of the rains and the frequency of the rainfall. These forecasts about droughts and floods rarely fail. But we have no recourse but to go hungry because we do not use this ancient knowledge to prepare for the lean days. This school will teach you all you need to know about growing food that will feed your family, not from hand to mouth, but from year to year. I am asking your blessing to run the school for 1 year. Your children will tell you what they learned every day. If you do not like it, we will close down the school and I will go back to the capital city, and I promise to you that I will not come back.
The speech had something to offer every child, parent, and elder in Sequala.
Village commentators later said that the address had the markings of both urban subtleties and rural openness. It certainly had the finesse of schooling, confidence, and strategy. Yet it was full of rural attributes, honesty, and respect. By choosing powerful words, the young man had unleashed fear and instilled hope, both at the same time. Masked with what looked like a compliment, the speech had a certain element of criticism. The next day, a miracle happened. Not only was Sequala awake, but also every man, woman, and child who had protested the previous day came back, this time singing a different tune. They came out in unison, guided by one desire, and held together by a common objective. A week later, the Saint Tekle Hamenot School was officially opened at a ceremony attended by priests, village elders, and prospective students.
While Sequala was going through this historical transition, something big was happening in our family. One morning in September, just before school opened, a delegation of 5 men arrived in our house unexpectedly. This was the day when we all performed the traditional charade. The first pretense was successfully carried out by the men who said that they had come to visit my father, who they had not seen for a long time. This fake pronouncement was followed by an equally artificial response by my father, who not only feigned a huge surprise to see the delegates, but also pleaded,
"In the name of Saint Tekla Hamanot, I urge you to come in and take a short rest."
Charade aside, this was the delegation sent by my father-in-law to present the official proposal for marriage. As soon as they walked in, the elders announced their decision not to touch a morsel of bread before they presented the true purpose of their visit. When allowed to proceed, they started with a lengthy lecture about the importance of marriage, the friendship of the two families to be united, and the need for girls to settle down early.
Remember, your daughter was not born when you gave your word of honor to your friend.
Having lost her mother, Almaz is all that I have in this world. She is my consolation prize from St. Tekla Hamanot. I need to be assured that she will be joining a family that will love, respect her. As for this schooled man, well, I pray to St. Tekla Hamanot that he will be like a brother, a friend, a husband who provides well.
Proposal accepted. The delegates settled down to enjoy a delicious feast of food and special drink prepared ahead of time in expectation of the visit. The wedding date was set for after Easter, at the end of the long and harsh Lent.
Aged 14, I was now ready to marry a man I had never met, barely saw, and hardly loved. Very soon I would be facing my wedding day, the riskiest and scariest period of my life. According to married women, wedding nights were filled with frightening stories of what we call the encounter, a word invented to camouflage the intimacy between a man and a woman. On this night, I would be forced to engage in the encounter so as to be tested for virginity, a sign of family honor and respectability.
In all the marriages of Sequala, not a single bride has ever succeeded in postponing the encounter. According to our culture, husbands must perform the encounter before society demands that the bride must be tested for virginity on her wedding night. The only exception was when husbands failed to perform because the thing refused to stand up.
What? I heard about the thing, but never knew that the thing stands up or sits down. But who does one ask? Any sign of curiosity would put me on the list of men in a hurry to enjoy carnal pleasure. I convinced myself to look disinterested, but kept praying that Lema Tessema's thing would just decide to sit down permanently. Every time my father saw the women busy in our house, he beamed with joy and complimented them.
Only in Sequala can we find such generosity. Who says my Almaz is motherless when she has all of you? St. Tekla Hamanot is rewarding me for the grief I suffered losing her mother. I cannot possibly return your kindness, but this I can do. I promise to give Almaz's first daughter to one among your sons. We will decide later whose son. In the meantime, this is my word of honor, and you can count on it.
We all know that you are crying for your mother, but remember, we are all your mothers, aren't we?
Only a few hours away, Sunday was the day to face my fate. To help me sleep, I was given a warm bath and milk. Whatever sleep I could manage was disturbed by a nightmare in which my husband came at me like a menacing beast. I tossed all night, enjoying the drumbeat, clapping, ululation, and melodious wedding songs coming from the huge tent. How I wanted to be a part of this night, but I was to remain in a private room. In the morning, before sunrise, a group of young women came into my room to prepare me for the wedding party, which was to arrive shortly to take me to church. To help loosen raw nerves, the women kept teasing me amidst laughter and jokes. I was dressed in my wedding outfit, bejeweled and prettified, until the women could not believe their eyes. Still playful, they warned that my beauty was such that it could easily paralyze my husband, resulting in a poor performance. They laughed until it hurt.
Tomorrow this time, having given your virginity, you will be joining our rank and file. If you scream loud enough, we should be able to tell the time of invasion.
Finally, I left the private room where I had been kept for what felt like a lifetime. By keeping me isolated, the plan was to first create curiosity, then a surprise about my looks. And it worked. As I came out, I was met by a large group of family members and friends who gasped in disbelief to see my transition into what they called an angel, a beauty, a princess, stunning, dazzling, dignified, unknown to the human eye, etc. Feeling somewhat flattered, I smiled timidly in appreciation. On my way out, I approached my father, knelt down, and kissed his right knee to ask his blessing. My father then said,
My daughter, you were a mere child when you were given the ability of looking at the family, and you gave me immense pride in your service. Today, as you accept another responsibility to serve your in-laws, I would like to tell you that every morning and night, as you labored to feed this family, I was awake, sometimes weeping, wondering how much you had to endure simply because you were a girl. Today, I stand before you to show you my gratitude and respect.
Wiping away his tears, he then announced my wedding gift, half of his entire livestock. Next, I asked for the blessings of my grandmothers, uncles, and aunts. Finally, I headed towards my brothers, who were standing together, looking lost between the happiness of the moment and the fear of a future without me. All four of them rushed towards me. We burst into one huge hug, weeping, all four planting kisses on my cheeks, shoulders, and hands. The oldest then asked for permission to announce something.
When you go to your in-laws, you will find a new cottage, which we built as a wedding gift from your brothers. This will be your own place where you will raise your children. Knowing your sense of privacy, we added a private outhouse only for your use.
Finally, it was time to join the groom's party, which was patiently waiting outside. Having heard about the Sequalan beauty, Lema Tessema was certainly dying to see me for the first time. But no, not so quickly. Strategically positioned in the middle of a three-tiered entourage, we deliberately made sure I was almost impossible to spot. Right next to me was a circle of dazzling girls dressed to the moon and sporting different hair braids, looking like brides in their own right. In the second tier was a group of mothers, young and old, dignified and proud. The third, led by my father and four brothers, was a formidable group of men. As we approached the groom's party, the two men who had formed my destiny before I arrived in this world moved forward, walking briskly towards each other. First, they shook hands vigorously, beaming with pride over their joint accomplishment. Next, they rested their hands on each other's shoulders, a sign of mutual respect for keeping their word of honor. Then, they hugged affectionately to show that the two families were
united to labor and harvest, to grieve and rejoice from this day onward.
United to labor and harvest, to grieve and rejoice from this day onward.
When we entered the church premises, we were welcomed by priests and deacons, nuns and monks, men and women, bright like the Sequala moon, wearing their Sunday best. Inside the church, there was no room left even for air. For hours I stood still, my head bowing down, while the clergy completed the 3-hour liturgy of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, the Holy Communion, the reading of the scripture, and the concluding celebration featuring special chants composed by the 6th century Saint Yared of Ethiopia. At the end of the service, we were asked to kneel down so the head priest could pronounce his blessing for a happy life filled with healthy children. Having taken Christ's body and blood, we were now united as husband and wife. Only death would do us part. In the event of a most unlikely divorce, he could remarry, and I would immigrate to another village where I would remain a pariah, unfit for community life. Flanked by adoring admirers, we slowly made our way back to my parents, where Lema Tessema was given a historic reception. On arrival, we were received by a rowdy crowd singing, dancing, and ukulele. As per tradition, the welcome songs singled out the best men for unkind words, calling them slow, lazy, and unfit for such a noble task. In response, Lema Tessema's friends demonstrated their worth by singing loud, jumping high, and taking the unkind words in good humor.
Amidst laughter, joy, and excitement, we made our grand entry into the tent, which was already filled with the entire village, invited by word of mouth, one peasant to another, one family to the next. As we were led to our seats, I was filled with pride and guilt to see how much had gone into this feast. I noticed that the earth had gotten softer with fresh, green-cut grass generously laid all over the ground. The air was filled with the welcoming scent of the eucalyptus tree. The scruffy peasants and fatigued women were transformed into eye-pleasing beings, with their bodies washed, oiled, and dressed in new or almost new attires. Thanks to Sequala women, my wedding was unprecedented in the quality and quantity of food and drink served. And there was my father with his usual excitement until I wished he would stop.
Thank God this is Sequala, the good Lord who keeps giving. He who never runs out of kindness, the kind of Lord who never holds back even when we hurt him. Our Lord is too quick to forgive and never holds grudges. The compassionate Lord never tires to respond to our plea. Imagine if he stopped giving every time we sinned. What if he were a government? He would tax us for the air we breathe, for our sight, for our mobility.
Suddenly, it hit me. Yes, it was time to depart. This was a time to grieve for me. A mere child, I was now to leave everyone and everything I had known since childhood. And to prove there was no coming back, I was reminded of an old story.
This young woman was so unhappy in her marriage that she decided to go back to her parents, seeking support and love. She walked a full day, traveling from her in-laws to her parents' village, filled with a vision of a happy reception. Her ears echoed the welcoming words of her mother, the assurance of her father, and the comforting laughter of siblings. Just before sunset, she reached where she could see her home and what looked like her father, busily tending to the garden. So she hastened her steps, eager to tell her story of abuse in the hands of her husband and in-laws. Suddenly, the father looked up and seemed to have recognized her. Sensing that this was not a normal visit, he asked,
"Is this my daughter? And what brings you here?"
I can't take it anymore, Father. I just can't. I am back home.
"This is not your home, daughter. You no longer belong to this family. Go back to your husband. That is your family now."
Then and there, she turned back and was never seen or heard from again.
We all pretended that this was a true story, but the fact was that it was invented and told at critical times in order to discourage women from thinking that they could always go back home if the marriage failed.
I must now digress to a different story. In our very long history, there had not been a single incident where a bride was found not to be a virgin in Sequala. Yet, every single bride had gone through the virginity test. This is how it was done. A piece of white cloth, cotton, fresh, never used, is left inside the private room where the groom and bride retire for the night. Here, the encounter takes place. The bride loses her virginity and starts to bleed, often for the first time. The piece of cloth is then stained with the bride's blood and presented to a group of mother elders camped outside, waiting for evidence of her virginity. Upon receiving the blood-stained cloth, the group declares a favorable verdict of virginity by erupting into euphoric jubilation.
Back to my story. I found myself alone with Lama Tasema in a private room. Sensing my fear, Lama Tasema addressed me for the first time.
Are you afraid, Almas? I promise in the name of Saint Tekla Haimanot that I will not harm you. I am so afraid myself. We will not do anything. Please believe me. I will not touch you tonight.
How about the virginity test? Sequela women told me that this evidence was so crucial that it could never be delayed, postponed, or canceled under any circumstances.
I feel conflicted to do this, but no price is high enough for our love. We must now swear to die with this secret.
Sitting on a stool, he then took out a fresh razor, made an incision on his leg, and asked me to hand him the piece of cloth, which was soaked in no time as he kept bleeding, forming a small red puddle right under his foot. I went down on my knees, covered his wound with my wedding shawl, and kept my finger pressed on the right spot. Still, the blood came out over the shawl and turned my 2 hands red. Reminded I had a cure for this, I rushed to get my special sack, loaded my herbal medicine, mixed it with water, piled it on top of the cut. He squirmed with the burning sensation. I looked up to see his reaction, and our eyes met for the first time.
As he kept looking at me, I was drawn as if under the influence of a powerful spell. As I remained frozen, it felt like time had stopped. Yes, I had fallen in love. The bleeding slowed down to a trickle, then stopped completely. I then cleaned up the room, leaving no traces of our scheme.
The time had finally come to report to the mother elders, who were still outside, eagerly awaiting the evidence of the virginity test. He slowly limped to the door, holding the carefully wrapped cloth, blood-soaked. He submitted the evidence to the representatives of the group. The group went berserk and erupted into the age-old song.
Our faithful daughter,
Our faithful daughter,
honor to father,
and honor to husband.
Now the ploy was successfully carried out. Lama Tasema looked relieved. He took my hand and led me to the bed where a set of gifts was displayed.
Saint Tekla Haimanot is my witness. I will shower you with love and gifts for the rest of my life. You are safe. I want you to have a good night's sleep. I will be resting on the small bed next to you.
I started my married life with a week-long honeymoon. This being a period of recovery, encounters were forbidden so the bride could heal. I gradually became a happy wife, a valuable member of the family, cooking, baking, weaving, and brewing, and giving relief to my mother-in-law and pride to my father-in-law. I shared my herbal medicine, treating my husband to special dishes beyond his expectation. Of all my skills, my academic progress brought endless amazement to my husband.
6 months ago, I did not know you, nor did I care for you. I only had feelings of fear towards you. How it happened, I cannot say. But today, I admit that I am truly in love with you. The love that God said we should have for each other is the love I have for you. I long for you when you're away. My heart jumps with delight when you're home, and I feel sensations all over my body every time you hold me. Your love is flowing in my blood, reaching every part of my body. No woman has ever loved as I am loving you.
Now that I know you do love me, I would like to tell you something. I am so afraid of hurting you that we will have to wait a bit longer before we engage in the encounter. I will never harm you, my sweet bride. I will indeed give my life for you.
Later that morning, I prepared a special breakfast and suggested that we invite his mother to join us for the coffee ceremony. When I told mother-in-law Lema Tesema was unwell and invited her to join us for coffee, she brought the inevitable subject.
I want to hear about your illness, Almas, not your husband's. When will you have morning sickness? It is now 6 months. Haven't you been visited by our beloved Saint Maria?
Not yet, Mother. What if he decides never to know me? What if we're to divorce? What if he stops loving me?
I took full responsibility for my unreasonable fear that prevented my husband from performing the encounter on our wedding night. Next, I blamed him. Then it was my mother-in-law whom I criticized for meddling in our life. As soon as she left, I told Lema Tesema that his mother was worried that I had not been visited by Our Lady Miriam.
This is time for education, not for children. We have time for a family.
I was not sent here for education. I'm here to have children.
A child cannot have a child. You are not ready to be a mother.
I think you're the one who's been unable to perform, not me.
That is not true. I feel like blowing up every time I touch you, and you're blaming me for not performing. Almas, do you really understand what an encounter is? Do you? My beloved, our culture is obsessed with the chastity of girls. So we invented a lifetime punishment called female circumcision, which in reality is the mutilation of the female organ in order to kill off the desire for intimacy. There is no justification to mutilate the entire female population simply because society has decided that women and girls are bearers of family honor. What you and I are enjoying is genuine, pristine love. Then there is this thing called fistula. If you get pregnant at such a young age, you will suffer fistula, which will leave you a tragic human being for the rest of your life, which is caused after days of pushing a baby that does not fit through the birth canal, causing severe damage. This means you will become incontinent, unable to control both urine and feces, producing an offensive smell that will surround you day and night. Believe me, a woman is shunned by her in-laws and yes, by her parents. My love for you is such that I am simply unable to take such a risk. While you have amazed me with your academic progress, you are not ready to be a teacher. My beloved, you need a few more years of schooling so you can take up an occupation and become self-sufficient. With education, you can see the fruits of your labor when young girls like you start to read, write, and go on to become teachers. This will give you a purpose in life.
I had just been presented with 3 possibilities: an old stubborn culture I could not change, the threat of a frightening disease, and a beautiful love that filled my heart to the brim. I felt like running away with myself. The next day, cured from his malaria, my husband took off work, promising to be home early to help me with my studies. I rushed to my in-laws, wondering whether the plan for the day was to cook, bake, brew, or weave. Instead, I was received by mother-in-law, looking rather impatient.
For 15 years, I longed for this boy every day. I think I now deserve some belated happiness as the grandmother of his son. Our son has brought us great honor with his schooling, so his name must be kept for prosperity. But you made sure that was not going to be. Almas, are you aware of the deep sadness you have caused this family? Your husband has confided in me of his immense love for you. But what is love in a childless home?
For a moment, I wondered whether these were mere words or spears with poison ends that pierced my heart. Then there was this painful realization that I was no longer the jewel of the family. When she was done, I quietly slipped out of the room and headed towards the kitchen, where I was given several tasks which I performed. Crushed with a bleeding heart, I finally headed home to attend to my studies. Back from work, if my husband noticed something amiss, he did not say so. He still looked cheerful and madly in love. He first checked my hands for cuts and bruises, then proceeded to embrace me, kiss me, compliment me for my beauty, admire me for my studies, and thank me for serving the family. All the spears that had pierced me earlier melted away, one by one, and my heart overflowed with joy. Early in the morning, we were surprised by mother-in-law.
Lemma, my son, you know that you are not an ordinary person or an average citizen. We have known this since your birth because of the unique gifts God has given you, because you are His choice. Because of you, today Sequala is on its way to civilization. Even though it seemed odd for a schooled man to marry a peasant girl, your father kept his word in marrying you to Almas. While we have no regrets about that, we shall never accept that you remain childless. Your father and I are grieving over the news that Almas is infertile. A young bride who loves her husband always conceives on the first encounter. If a bride cannot conceive at 15, it is a sign that there is a serious problem. Almas, I assure you there is no history of infertility on our side. Praise be to our beloved Mariam. She has blessed us abundantly. So we have decided that you must go back to your family at once and seek treatment for infertility.
Mother, I love you. I honor you and I admire you. You are the glue who held our family together in good and bad times. You are a woman of courage who sacrificed a 5-year-old child to urban life because you believed schooling would bring a bright future to him, to our family, and the community. But today, you have hurt me profoundly. If you must know the truth, Almas is still a virgin. I have not touched her on her wedding night, during the honeymoon, or in the last 6 months. She is as she has come. The virginity evidence I submitted to mother elders was stained with my own blood, not hers. And I am ready to die for her. This is how much I love my wife. From the moment I laid eyes on my bride, I knew that we were meant for each other. Almas does not need treatment. She will conceive when she is ready.
On his way out, he approached her, knelt down, and kissed her knees to ask for forgiveness. She touched his head to say, I forgive you. The next day, both parents arrived at dawn, armed with an ultimatum.
Son, we are here to discuss the tragedy that has befallen this family. Please bear with us. You two seem to think that our culture is a haphazard collection of beliefs and practices with no meaning or purpose. In reality, everything we do in this society is of value for the society. So you must see us from where we are, Lemma, not from where you stand. Our values have grown out of a long tradition that sustained us for generations. So please spare us your school judgment. It may not look good to you, but our culture is right for our eyes. This brings me to this family's utmost concern, that of children, your children. Son, when the British invaded our nation, our valiant leader, Emperor Tewodros, retreated to the Magdala Plateau, where he tried to stop the advancing enemy. When he realized that the British had the upper hand, he shot himself dead because he could not bring himself to see his people under a foreign rule. The British abandoned their plan of colonization, but on their way out, they plundered our nation. While we had lost much during this plunder, it was the abduction of our Prince Heir, who they took to their country, that left a lasting scar on our nation. To this day, we continue to grieve over this loss. Why? Children are not born to husbands and wives. Every child is born to society. Here, children are not the accidental outcome of an encounter. There is always a higher purpose for having them. When God created us, he did not say, go and have sex. He told us to multiply and fill the earth. This encounter that you disdain is God's gift. Admittedly, women do carry the heaviest weight because they, not men, were chosen by our beloved Miriam, bearers of this gift. So if your wife experiences some discomfort Due to the encounter, nature has its own way of healing her pain. My son, our society has been in existence for centuries, and no one has ever defied our culture in such a fragrant way as you two did. By staining the virgin test cloth with your own blood, you misled the entire village.
Lemma, you might find us slow, uninspiring, and dull, but we do have the same capacity to think, to love, and to feel pain or enjoy happiness. God has given us the same feelings that you claim to be solely yours. You have no monopoly on love or respect for women. God is our witness. We never did and never planned to harm them. We may be backward in many things, but lack of love is not one of them.
As much as we are known for respect and generosity, we are unforgiving against those who disrespect our culture and defy our values. It is therefore with much regret that I inform you that my family has decided to disown you and your wife.
When they walked out, my husband fell on his knees and cried like a child.
You are enjoying my love story in broken English. We're about to take a 10-minute break. Don't go far. We'll be right back.
In the early hours of the next day, my father, accompanied by 4 sons, arrived in response to a request from my father-in-law, who, they said, had told them the full story, and asked for help in facilitating our move out of his homestead. We cleared out the newly built cottage, packed our belongings, and headed toward a new life. Except for love, our marriage was now bankrupt, tarnished with dishonor, shame, gossip, and dislocation. My husband would be ridiculed as a coward who conspired to shelter his infertile wife at the expense of his own reputation, calling him the man who tampered with the virginity test. Upon arrival in my father's homestead, we quietly slipped into our cottage, where we took shelter from a warring society. Not a single person turned up to utter a welcoming word or to extend a helping hand. And these were the same people who had feasted at our wedding.
As we say in Sequala, once fallen, a majestic tree becomes the playground for ants and beetles. Once King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, we were now 2 refugees. As if he read my mind, my husband comforted me.
Almaz, if you feel unwelcome here, we can go to Addis Ababa, where I can take a teaching job and you will attend school.
My beloved husband, you have lost most of what you earned, the love of your family and the respect of our society. This is no less than loss of life. You cannot recover this loss merely by fighting your or my family, because the entire old culture is our foe, and a formidable one. You must once more use education as your tool to bring about this change. This demands standing up, not running away. So I urge you to allow me to be with you as you fight this war, because my love for you is just as deep, as genuine, and as everlasting as yours is for me.
Lemma Tessema had a gift of expressing love that was firm and gentle, strong but kind. As I rested my head on his chest, his hand on my forehead, and my arms around his waist, he told me a story from a distant land, a story of love and tragic death due to a family feud.
William Shakespeare wrote our story a long time ago. Like Romeo and Juliet, we are young, in love, and condemned to a sin we did not commit. But, unlike them, we will not die. Our love shall triumph over evil.
One day, something unexpected happened. We received a surprise visit from my father and 3 of my brothers, who had decided to end their boycott. The 4th decided to opt out. With this day of reconciliation, the stars were about to shine upon us. Already committed to prospective wives, My 3 brothers were expected to be married off, one after another, but they told my husband that they had decided to follow his example and delay the wedding. They vowed to support us even if they felt that what we did was deceitful.
Brother-in-law, we shall not continue to be bystanders, watching you from a distance as you put your name, your future, and your life to the test for the sake of our sister.
Finally, 3 serious, genuine comrades declared their support. Lema Tessema told them that this was not only about their sister, but also for every girl and woman in our society. He succeeded in educating my brothers, developed an alliance with a common purpose, and instilled strong discipline among his recruits.
It was on this morning I woke up with a headache that I named Madam Thunder. When the holy water from St. Taclahamana Church failed, the elders agreed that a different treatment be tried. After poking and bleeding me, the medicine man ordered that I be taken from the big city for further treatment. But this was the era when our country was run by the Satan, the Lucifer himself, known as the Black Stalin, who was murdering our people from one end of the country to the other. Our socialist leader had unleashed something called the Red Terror, with a plan to turn villages into a map of ashes.
My husband already knew that I was unwell, for he had been feeling my fever all night. But what we ignored as a silly headache had lasted all day, giving us serious concern. With my instruction, he prepared my herbal medicine, which I snorted, sipped, and pasted on my forehead. I slept soundly. In the morning, I woke up with a headache, this time worse. My husband gave me a couple of pills that I swallowed.
Finally, the elders admitted that they felt inadequate for the job at hand because failure would mean death. Before dawn, the elders' assembly assigned a representative to present the full report of decision to the villagers.
Tonight, the elders were told by Lema Tessema what happened on the wedding night had nothing to do with Almaz. It was not her wish, nor had she planned it. It was her husband's. He told us that his objective was to give his wife time to grow, both mentally and physically, so she was well prepared for her new life as a mother. Lema Tessema is still committed to this decision, even if it meant going against Sequala's values. Having heard this background, the elders were remorseful of the community's action against the couple. After long and sober consultations, the assembly agreed unanimously that Almaz should be taken to a neighboring country where she can receive treatment for this mysterious disease and brought back to her marriage, her community, her village. As you all know, we will have to follow the route familiar to the political refugees whom we often shelter here as they flee the demonic army. This route has so far remained unknown. We need to be well prepared for this fateful journey, as we will be carrying a near-dead woman through a long, barren land filled with the bandits and often visited by nature's fury. At the request of her husband, the assembly has made a solemn vow that if our Lord spares Almaz's life, we will commit to stopping the practice of female circumcision, the virginity test, and raising the marriage age. Sequala is now ready for change.
The villagers were now told that an advanced group had already left to convey a message to every hamlet along the way to expect a sick refugee who needed to be looked after. In the morning, unified as one force, the traveling mass assembled, stretching as far as the eye could see. When we started the journey, the stretcher was carried by 4 men, led by my weeping husband.
Dressed in my late mother's wedding gown, my face covered with a veil, and a white cloth draped over me, I looked like I was on my way to the cemetery when they carried me out of the cottage. I heard what I thought was a huge thunder, but no, this was the collective cry of the villagers.
Lord, please do not make Sequala the graveyard of a beautiful love.
Throughout the journey, I had been a model patient, complimented for my cooperation. The leaders told my husband they were impressed by my resilience. I finally asked for a private meeting with my husband to try to convince him to postpone the trip, so he presented the request for the leaders' consideration.
We are too near a long-sought objective to delay. After all, only time is standing between Alma's life and her death. Our plan is to take her back home, not to bury her here.
As we pressed on, the force dwindled considerably, as many fell ill due to injury, disease, or sheer fright. The group's familiar tone of optimism and songs of bravery were silenced. Gradually, the conversation among the volunteers turned into a whispered,
Hush, hush.
as if they were keeping a secret from me. There were several attempts to distract my attention away from this chaos, but I kept asking for my husband until they finally responded.
Your husband is down with malaria, and he has forgotten to carry both his herbal medicine and his malaria pills.
I could not understand what this information entailed and kept calling, Lama Tasama. One of the priests touched my forehead with a cross, said a quick prayer, and explained that my husband had fallen ill and was too sick to take care of me. I jumped out of my stretcher and howled like a wounded beast before I passed out. My husband insisted on coming to my stretcher. Here, we laid next to each other. We were burning as if we were put on a pyre, but I was determined to burn with him. When I realized he was barely conscious, I kissed his hand and said, "Father of my children, I am here with you." I tucked my face inside his neck, and we continued to burn like two bright torches. We defied the dark reality of the bereavement field, and our love triumphed over the cruel malaria. As hope and desperation hovered us, we fought death with courage as it threatened to murder our precious love. In the morning, we saw the last dawn of our beauty. Our eyes met briefly, and we managed to say an incoherent,
I love you.
"I love you," just before my husband took his last breath. It was only then my wedding dream, an omen of death. Death had been eyeing my husband for some time, the visionary who brought an ancient village out of the darkness, who stood up for women, the passionate groom who knew the meaning of love, died in a desolate land. Later that day, I was carried on a stretcher to his funeral. Age 16, I had become a widow. I buried a 23-year-old groom who died on my behalf. Dry like desert sand, my heart was drained of all human feeling. As we say in Sequala, God never gives a load we cannot carry. Miraculously, I came out of the bereavement field, and on the 6th day of the journey, we arrived in the border of the neighboring country.
The next day, I was taken to the clinic where I had undergone extensive medical tests that revealed the cause of the so-called Madam Thunder, a vicious brain tumor. A team of professionals led by Canadian surgeon Caldwell was put together to operate on me. As the nurses prepared me for surgery, I could tell from their faces this was a hopeless case, the beginning of my end. But little did they know that I was never meant to die. And true, after 3 months in intensive care, I came out of a coma with my sight and my hearing restored. I uttered my first words.
Lama Tasama.
This moved the entire medical team to tears, As far as Sequala was concerned, the news was that Lema Tessema was lost in a forsaken land, while Ama Tefrera was left in a foreign land waiting for a final resting place.
It was now more than a year since my surgery. I started bouncing back, showing signs of life, that a young man arrived from my village to deliver a message from my family. The government had declared me persona non grata for leaving the country in support of the revolution. The government was also emboldened into issuing a warning that any family or individual who sheltered, supported, or hid me was liable to the same charges. This frightened my family into sending a secret message.
If you are still alive, we thank our beloved Saint Tekle Hamanot for having spared you. Had your husband lived, he would have faced the bullets of the Revolutionary Army. You would have spent your life in prison, a place we have all survived with permanent scars. But the Lord is on our side, for we have prevailed. Walk with your heart full of pride. Your husband did not die in vain. We have shed precious blood in our history, and we shall honor his legacy as one who transformed Sequala. While we have entered a new era of equality, our victory is hollow, for we shall never see you again. We will never heal from the pain of this loss, but we will find solace in knowing that our daughter will now grow up in an equal society with opportunity to gain knowledge, build capacity, and realize their potential. May Saint Tekle Hamanot be with you.
My heart, which was emptied of all human feeling following the death of my husband, suddenly felt joy, and I was filled with pride to hear about his legacy. Lema Tessema had refused to know me so I could mature, become a woman, enjoy motherhood, and achieve self-sufficiency. No sooner had I felt a glimmer of joy when my heart was filled with the deepest sense of sadness, realizing that I had lost my motherland as well. Suddenly, I felt a strong need for a country where I would be called Ethiopian, of Tefera, the wife of Lema Tessema, the child of Sequala. Yes, with all its vices, I miss Sequala. The bond between a nation and its citizen always remains where the umbilical cord is buried.
Months later, Dr. Rob Caldwell entered my room with a young woman translator. With her assistance, he inquired about my health and, for the first time, gave me the full story of my surgery and recovery, with details as to how the team fought to save my life. He told me that I was named the Miracle Jewel because I kept coming back every time they thought they had lost me. This Canadian surgeon who had taken me under his wing throughout this ordeal was now embarking on another life-saving mission.
I think that the one-legged saint of your village is still protecting you. Today, I can say with confidence that you have recovered fully. The time has now come to prepare you for life outside the Médecins Sans Frontières clinic. What do you wish to do, Almaz?
To go look for my husband's grave and take his remains for a proper burial in our village, open a school in my husband's name, and spend the rest of my life educating about a fair and equal society, free from the barriers that prevent women and girls from realizing their potential. My husband was a truly strong man who died for the love of his wife.
You no longer have a country to go back to. Appeal to this country for asylum. Canada is where slaves from America escaped to in search of freedom. Among those slaves was a woman called Harriet Tubman, who made 19 trips to bring her people out of slavery in America to freedom in Canada. You will be the modern Harriet Tubman, minus the Underground Railroad. Here, you can promote your husband's vision because equality between women and men is still elusive throughout the world.
My application for refugee sponsorship was submitted within days, but it took 3 years for my case to be processed and approved. During the waiting period, I attended class, volunteered, read books, wrote poems, while educating myself about the place of women in different societies. While broadening my knowledge about women in societies, I remained in denial about my fate, often asking myself, what happened? Why am I here and not in Sequala? Where is my life and the one with the loving husband and 2 children? How do I face the future without Lama Tasama? Eager to open a new chapter, I started to imagine my life in Canada. It was at this time that a poem written for Canada was read out in our refugee class. I'm on my way to Canada, that old and dreary land. The dire effects of slavery I can no longer stand. My bone is vexed within me to think that I am slave, and now resolve to strike the blow for freedom or the grave. O righteous Father, wilt thou pity me and aid me to Canada, where colored men are free?
I was so touched by the message that I decided to memorize the poem, reciting it every night as part of my daily prayer, replacing the last lines for O Saint Tekla Hamenot, aid me to Canada where refugees can be free. Finally, my prayers were answered. My application was accepted. In preparing for the future, I felt nothing but a great sense of gratitude to this neighboring country called the Sudan. Yes, the Sudan had sheltered me for 4 years, and its people shared their space with complete strangers like me. I wept for my second homeland, which I was about to leave.
The year was 1990. I boarded a plane bound for Canada as a 20-year-old mature woman, a widow of a remarkable man who empowered me with love, courage, and hope. I was no longer the little girl of Sequala, the child bride suspected of infertility, the young victim of harmful cultural practices, and the vile wife who produced fake virginity test results. I had been transformed. I was an informed, confident woman with infinite potential for self-sufficiency, ready to contribute to society and determined to pull others up as I climbed. I shed tears of joy, and my heart smiled with hope. As I was exiting the airport, I stopped to read each letter slowly. Welcome to Canada. Such a nice phrase. Wiping tears, I responded quietly, thank you, Canada. I promise to help build a society where men stand up for women, like my husband, the late Lama Tasama.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce author Anailam Tebesja.
Salam, bonjour, greetings. This is Anailam Tebesja, author of my love story in broken English. We were treated to a fantastic virtual reading of my book, so I would like to start by expressing a great sense of honor and deep gratitude to Fame for giving my book such a respected platform. I will always be indebted to the Guild for giving me such an honor. So let me tell you how I started to write this book. 6 years ago, I lost my husband, the late Dr. Joseph Magnoni, and I was overwhelmed with grief. So I started to write as a healing process what I had hoped would be a memoir, but I couldn't. So I abandoned it and continued to write something else, which now became my novel, which I launched in 2018. So what is the story of this book? My love story in broken English is about the human spirit, about the power of love, about loss and triumph, Here, a 14-year-old bride and a 20-year-old groom stand up to a very enduring culture armed with nothing but love. In the end, they pay a very tragic price, but they triumph. So, in telling this story, what did I try to share with my readers? Well, first of all, I highlighted the gender issues of child marriage, early marriage, forced marriage, FGM, virginity test, and the mistreatment of infertile women. In doing so, I tried to show the contradictions. Outside the cultural context, these practices are repugnant, but when you are inside the culture, they seem to have some value. So, having shown the contradictions, I brought in the role of the educator, that's the groom, to show that education is an effective tool for change. The other message is about the misperception that gender equality is not valued in African societies. In fact, in this book, I've shown you that inequality between women and men is a global phenomenon. In every culture, women were mistreated throughout the world. In the African society, women as girls, that is, as daughters, as mothers, as elders, have a very high place. However, the cultural practices are harmful. Now, some people ask me, what do you want to do with this book? Well, right now, I'm just happy that my book is with the Fame family. But God willing, one day I want to see it as a reading requirement for gender studies in high school and university. Now, in closing, I would like to mention my childhood friend Tsegga Habte for bringing my book to the attention of Fame. My friendship with Tsegga is another story of the power of love. Tsegga and I have been separated longer than we have been together, but we remain true friends through education and profession, marriage and family, failure and success, joy and grief. So for that friendship, Tsegga, thank you. Now to her twins, Mercy and Merha. I feel blessed that these stunning, brilliant, disciplined, God-fearing twins are acting in my book as the role of the protagonist. Now, to the cast, you brought a beautiful, multicultural life with beautiful voices and beautiful faces to my book. Please accept my heartfelt thanks. To the crew, your hard work and patience has paid in a big way. The director, the stage manager, the professionals behind the scene, to each one of you, I am grateful. Now we come to the engine, the torch, the force behind this project, Mrs. Hayward Stetson, whom we affectionately call Mrs. Carmen. When Mrs. Carmen said, "I adore your book," I wept because I knew this was a professional woman in the field who knew the merit of the message. But I never expected her to open the world to my book or to bring my book to the global family. For that, I will always be grateful to Mrs. Carmen. I love you, I respect you, I honor you. To all of you, Fame family and friends, once more, it was a great pleasure to be associated with you. God bless and thank you.